If I'm starting to sound a bit like a broken record, I apologise. Assassin's Creed Valhalla's river raids dropped recently, and so I thought it would be a good idea to sit down and give the update a go. See what new content awaited in this 20-something gigabyte monster patch. And well, in typical Ubisoft fashion, it's a whole lot of generic nothing content. At least that's how I found it. If you find it to be different, then that's perfectly fine, but I feel like I need to express my opinion, so this might upset a few people, and if that's the case, then I wouldn't watch at all, because what does it add for you? What are you doing? That being said, if you want to watch regardless, then you're still more than welcome to. Not like I can stop you, because it's not like you can stop me making this video to begin with, is it? I'm like a cancer. Oh god. The River Raids is a free update for those who own Valhalla. It may seem a bit unfair to criticise like it was paid for, but I think it's fair to do so, and I'll explain why as we go. But I'm not going to pretend it's important one way or the other, because it's not. Not in itself anyway. But just the same, I kind of fancy getting my thoughts out, so let's begin. Firstly, let's have a look at how it's introduced. You return to Ravensthorpe, where you meet a guy who you've never seen before in your life, who says, "Oh, I found some cool raiding spots. Come with me, Eivor, who I've just met. Let's go raiding." And Eivor goes, "Yeah, sick." And that's all the storytelling justification that this minigame gets. You take a ship full of Yome's Viking raiders and go to new areas of England, which I guess is kinda cool, I'll give them credit. If these new areas were interesting remotely, which hurts to say considering one of them's the River Exe, which is in Devon, which is where I'm from. These new areas only exist to serve the purpose of giving you places to raid. There's nothing else going on in these areas whatsoever, which would ordinarily be fine, but the delivery of this entire system makes it feel less like a minigame and more like a more open world space. You spend a lot of time sailing from A to B between one raid location and the next, and that entire negative world space is just completely useless. Because when you're travelling from A to B, it doesn't feel like a minigame, and you know where everything is going to happen and when. Nothing unexpected is going to occur necessarily, you just move. Often a lot of the locations aren't even creatively named either. A lot of them are just called small camps, which, I mean, come on. At the very least, give every location a unique name of some sort so that you know where you are. Making that distinction is even harder when some of these locations are almost identical. This type of minigame wouldn't have been too badly out of place in the older Assassin's Creed games, but in this new role-playing game format, this is terrible utilisation of the world space. There's no atmosphere in these new world spaces, and there's no attempt at making an atmosphere. Sometimes while you're sailing along, you'll just hear nothing, not even birdsong in the distance. And that guy you met back in Ravensthorpe who told you about these locations will point out that he finds it weird that it's always so quiet. He doesn't break the silence often, but I found it funny that one time that he does, he's pointing out that it's silent all the time. All it actually suggests to me is that Ubisoft knew that this traversal was going to be uninteresting and bland at the best of times, and I find it funny how instead of actually fixing the issue, they just threw in a self-aware joke about it. The bland travel along these rivers is going to eat up a huge portion of the playing time of this minigame, considering that you can only carry so much resources before you have to head back to the settlement to unload it. And there are no fast travel points in these world spaces, so you just have to sort of begin at the start of the river again and sail up towards a location that you haven't raided yet, which could take some time. Barring a blockade of enemies to kill every now and then or an ambush, that's just boring. If they'd given us little fast travel spots where you could choose roughly where you spawn in an area, it wouldn't have been so much of an issue. It wouldn't have been gone, but it would have helped save unnecessarily wasting the player's time, which is something that Ubisoft is very fond of doing. They've got a really strange design philosophy of take as many shortcuts as possible but not give the player any if they can help it. Not having shortcuts as the player isn't the end of the world, provided that world doesn't actually make you want one. Surely this minigame has to be worth it for the rewards you get. Well, you can get supplies like iron ore and leather, which you can use to upgrade stuff, and occasionally a bit of silver and some rations, which you can get anywhere anyway. But the big thing is foreign supplies. What the fuck are foreign supplies? What does that mean? And the bigger question is, what separates them from ordinary supplies that you get on any other raid that you can do in the game? I'll give you the answer. It's nothing. It's just a separate in-game currency that is dedicated exclusively to River Raid related upgrades. Your Yome's Viking hut back in Ravensthorpe, or upgrading the capacity on your longship. You can also use it to buy some customization stuff that this guy sells for some reason. Why does the guy who declared himself to be the king of river raids sell cosmetic items on the side for no reason? I guess a side hustle's good when you're otherwise fucking useless. There are two reasons I see why the foreign supplies are separate from the regular supplies when in reality there'd be no difference. One, a different distribution of what that currency can get you and how frequently you will find it, because on river raids you will find more foreign supplies and it could become something of a cheese for raiding in the main game. And secondly, it's so you actually play the river raids in order to acquire river raid upgrades. It does really kind of make sense, but I still find foreign supplies as a name for a box full of supplies to be ridiculous, especially when you're finding them in Devon. Regardless, the reward incentive for doing the river raids is completely isolated to doing the river raids, and so if you didn't do it, you wouldn't feel like doing it would give you any advantage, and so you could just ignore it. And the raids also don't boast anything especially fun to make doing them worthwhile as a means of entertainment. Before I get onto that problem, however, let me talk about the reward that does actually carry out of this minigame, which is an armor set. Is it a new extravagant armor set like the ones you see being sold for ridiculous money on the Helix store? No. It's a reskin of the Thane's armor set. At least virtually, there are some differences, but you can clearly see that the St. George armor is based on the Thane armor set, and it's clear to see that they just cared more about making these extra armor packs that they could sell for more money than a free armor set they put in an update as a reward for doing bollocks. So it doesn't function too great as a reward incentive for doing these river raids, as all it allows you to do is get about Anglo-Saxon England dressed as neither a Viking nor assassin, but rather as a Crusades Templar in a Viking Assassin's Creed game. Why would Eivor, a Norse Viking, get about dressed as a Christian? The armor set isn't even that good. Let's move on to the fun aspect. Is river raids actually fun? Well, the raiding system in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is meant to be part of the major selling point to this being a Viking Assassin's Creed game, and yet in the main game it sort of fell flat. This sort of system relies heavily on combat, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla's combat is hardly the game's redeeming feature. In fact, a lot of the gameplay systems in this game just aren't that great, and so the fun of it quickly dissipates without some form of narrative going on to keep you interested. I think it's one of the reasons why I enjoyed the main game, but I find myself feeling a little bit exhausted while playing this minigame. They do try to spruce it up with some new mechanics, if you can call it that, but they aren't as deep as they pretend to be. In fact, they're incredibly superficial. The longer you spend in an area, the higher the alert level is, and as a result of that, more enemies show up. But that doesn't matter because the game's piss easy. Your Yomes Vikings can be incapacitated in battle, and if they do, you have to go over and revive them using one ration.
Ah, I see you have been impaled by a fire sword. Here, have a scran. It'll make you feel much better.
If you don't get to them in time, they will die and go back to Ravensthorpe to recover. But you can remove this risk altogether by going into an area and killing all the guards there and then summoning the raid to just quickly grab the loot. And of course you can choose who comes with you on these raids back at Ravensthorpe, recruiting from the Yomes Viking Hall. The higher the level of the Yomes Vikings, the less chance they have of being incapacitated easily. Not that it really makes a noticeable difference in combat. In fact, sometimes a Yomes Viking just comes along and does mad damage, and it's actually quite funny. But you get my general point, these systems don't really make much of a difference. They're fairly shallow and don't really add anything of value to the gameplay. In fact, it's quite hard to add depth to essentially what is raiding a location, taking one chest and then leaving. It's just a needless resource grind for the sake of a resource grind, so you can get rewards that don't actually affect anything besides from stuff that you can use to grind for more resources that you don't need. The combat's sloppy and completely unengaging. The locations you find aren't unique, a lot of them just feel completely identical to each other. There's nothing of interest in these world spaces at all. There's no joy in the actual raids and there's no joy in the exploration. Sailing from A to B is just dead and miserable, and I think you get it, this entire river raids thing just doesn't do it for me. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a game simply packed with far too much nothing content. It did not need an entirely new minigame full of more. I found the river raids to simply be far too repetitive and far too uninteresting to begin with. In fact, it felt like I'd done it all before I even started, because the raids in the base game was something that I rolled my eyes at. The only reward worth doing these river raids for in any capacity could be arguably the armor set that you can get for doing it. However, the St. George armor is effectively just a reskin of the Thane's armor set, which is hugely indicative of Ubisoft's attitude towards their free content, or what they consider to be free content because it's not actually free, because in order to access it you still need to buy the game. The armor set you get can't be as good as the stuff you get on the Helix store because they want you to buy the stuff on the Helix store. So to conclude this, the River Raids are a bit of a soulless rehash of an uninteresting game mechanic with extra bits that aren't as deep as they pretend to be, and has nothing to actually do with Assassin's Creed. This is a point I haven't brought up because it's not necessarily relevant, but considering everything I've brought up already, it's funny how they didn't even use the franchise's get out of jail free card. The last thing Assassin's Creed Valhalla needs is more bloat, and I feel like this minigame adds exactly that. Bloat. It's unrefined bollocks. Sure, you may be happy that the game is just giving you more stuff to do, more content the way you put it, but the way I see it is, the game's taking what should be worth 10 minutes of content and stretching it out over several hours. And to me, that's nothing content. Surely less time and resources needs to be wasted on nothing mechanics and nothing content, and should go towards actually patching the game, fixing some of the bugs that still persist. I don't doubt that Ubisoft has the ability to do both, but there are some serious issues with the game that need fixing on a technical level. In fact, if people coming into my stream chat are anything to go by, this River Raids actually introduced a few new bugs. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against throwing extra content into your game for free. I feel like if anything that's a good thing, but it still needs to be serviceable content. But hey, that's just my opinion. Maybe you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine, that's what the comment section is there for, right? I'm going to leave this one here before I talk too much about the River Raids and then feel really bad about it. So thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be fantastic. And with any luck I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, take care and goodbye.